So you're in the planning stages of building your ultimate sprint car simulator, but you're not sure what to do, or where to go, or what to add. Well, don't worry. Stay tuned. We'll show you exactly what we do to create the ultimate hardcore sprint car simulator. So I'm Brett from Maverick Simulations, and what we do here is we create the ultimate sprint car simulators from used or wrecked sprint car chassis. What we do is we take a lot of like real racing components, we modify them, add our electronics, add our design, add our features, and that way you'll be able to utilize a real race car chassis for popular sim racing titles such as iRacing, which that's the primary one that we focus on. And what we're going to go through here in this video is, as you're building a sprint car simulator, you know, there's other components you can add to it. There's other features you can add to it. And if you don't know what's going on, or if you've never done it before, it can get a little bit mind-boggling. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through this chassis here that we're just wrapping up here for a customer, and we're gonna show you all the tabs, all the features, all the adjustments, and all the changes that we made to this chassis to create a hardcore sprint car simulator. And what we mean by hardcore sprint car simulator is that this chassis right here is designed to be only replicating a sprint car chassis. So we're gonna add our hydraulic brake system and our throttle system, and that's it. Now we do offer a hybrid sprint car chassis, and what that does is that actually starts right here at the motor plate and continues forward. And what that does is it's gonna add length to the chassis, probably right around like 2 to 3 feet. And then what you do there is you can actually add additional pedals up there, such as Fanatec or Thrustmaster. You know, eventually we're going to release our hydraulic, like late model type sprint car pedals, and that can be extended further up. That way, when you're doing the longer endurance races or even like road racing, it's a lot more of an ergonomic feel, a lot more comfortable to extend your feet out rather than trying to use the sprint car brake and throttle pedals for those long endurance races, and like when you're trying to use the brakes a lot for a lot of those corner entries such as road racing. It's a lot more challenging. And so the donor chassis that we use for this customer build right here is a KPC chassis. KPC chassis are a West Coast chassis, and they're a little bit more different than what we're more accustomed to here over on the East Coast. We're very familiar with like XXX, J&J, Maxima. So we had to make some additional changes to this chassis compared to what we normally do on, let's say, a XXX or Maxima chassis. So here's some of the features that we had to do and change, and then just some of the standard practices that we do also to turn this into an ultimate sprint car simulator. Okay, so we're gonna do a walk around here on our hardcore sprint car simulator, and then we'll show you what changes that we made to this chassis whenever we got this bad boy in. Okay, so this guy right here, like I said, was a KPC chassis. And a couple of things were a little bit different on this chassis compared to other ones that we're familiar with, such as like Maxima, Maxima, XXX, J&J. We had to make a couple little adjustments to this car here and a couple little tweaks that we don't normally do to our sprint car simulators. Okay, so we're just gonna start here at the front and work our way around the car. So one of the first things that we do here is right here's where the down tubes are at, depending on what chassis you get. If you get a really old chassis, this is not going to have those down tubes that come down here. It's going to be a non-down tube car, but most of our cars are fairly newer around here that we work with. So what we do is cut everything flush. We have a plate made, stick the plate on, weld it, grind it, nice and smooth. Everyone's happy. Okay. We want to set up a reference point on these cars too. So to the reference points that we use here is we use the top of where the factory dash would be. So right here. These are typically anywhere from 35 to 36 inches off the bottom rail to where the top of the dash is. Crazy part about that is from the distance from here to here, this is all the sprint car drivers see as they whip around the track like 100, 120 miles an hour. Absolutely ludicrous. That's what we love about them. Okay, the other reference point that we like to do is right down here is where the motor plate would go. Usually the center line of the crankshaft is a reference points for a lot of chassis builders. So we always try to mark like just the center line of the chassis, not necessarily the height wise, just the left or right. And that's gonna be like a reference measurement for a lot of our cars. Okay, so with this being a hardcore sprint car chassis, the difference is that this one we built a little enclosure that goes front of the motor plate. And what this does in here is this houses all of our electronics, all of our communication boxes, all the wiring. That way when you're in the cockpit, it doesn't look like a video game. It looks absolutely immersive as we possibly can make it. And we hide all that other crap out here. All the crap that makes it work. So a couple of things that we do inside here, we just mount little tabs on here. We put a couple of accessory tabs on here. Every build's a little bit different, but like what we do here is we put tabs on here, fab up some aluminum plates that go right here, and that gives us a large flat surface to mount our electronics to. We usually don't like to put anything on the dash or the motor plate, just to help improve the aesthetics so we don't have screws going into the driver's cockpit that aren't there normally nor naturally in a real sprint car. So try our best to create that immersion level straight out of the gate. We were talking about welding tabs, so we always cut the chassis right here where the motor plate is. We have a round cap that we put over top of that, weld that, and then that gives us a welding point also when we drop down from an 1 3/8 tubing down to a 1-inch tubing. Okay, KPC chassis problem number 1 that we ran into. Motor mount bolts. We use, have Maverick Simulations plastic motor plates that use a traditional bolt pattern. KPCs do not use a traditional bolt pattern. They are actually in, I think it's like right around 3/4 to 1 inch off the center line of like what we're normally used to. So if you buy one of our motor plates and you have a KPC chassis, you have to just mock it up there, line up our holes with these holes, and then mark them from the back side, and then re-drill all 4 of your holes, because our motor plates won't work. They work without, but they won't work without modifications. Okay. Factory dashes. You can use factory dash. What we do different here at Maverick Sim is we go ahead and put our tabs in. A lot of tabs are right here, and we put a tab in here, and normally the dash would come up to here, which we don't do. And the reason why we actually, this is the top of our dash right here, we make it horizontal and level with the steering bar. And the reason why we do that is because on this build right here, we're using triple 32 monitors, and the monitors are actually gonna come all the way into here, and they're basically gonna kind of sit like right about here on this level right here. And the neat thing about using iRacing, whether it's a sprint car, late model, doesn't matter what it is, we're actually gonna use part of the virtual dashboard in iRacing for the sim. And the reason why is because you can see the autometer gauges and also the tail tack in there a lot easier rather than having a dash at the real location. Now, by chance on our in-house car, if you use a 49-inch ultra-wide screen, having a dash at the real height is perfectly fine, because that doesn't give you much viewing area anyways, proportional-wise for the height. So if you bring your real dash up here, that's perfectly fine. I would advise, if you ever want to go to a 32, 35, anything along those lines, and you do have a tall dash, maybe make a 2-piece, so that way if you ever get a bigger monitor, instead of cutting your panel, you just Zeus panel it off, and then you're good to go. Okay, a couple of pieces that we add right here, zap, 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 zap. We use, these are for shock adjusters, mainly used in wingless sprint car racing and midgets. And we created some out of CSI shocks, shock adjusters. So these are those tabs that we use on here, okay? These tabs are here. Don't hold me to the ringer on this one here for these tabs. What these guys are for is a brake bias controller. Dirt sprint cars don't have brake bias controllers. Pavement sprint cars may, but you know, late models do, asphalt circuit track cars do, road race cars do. So we developed a Wilwood brake bias controller that'll bolt right here to this location, pre-trick. Okay, problem number 2 for KPC chassis with our builds. Half box mounts. This half box mount was originally like here, coming out level almost. Well, if you use one of our SimMagic steering plate mounts, it hits bad. It hits to the part where it doesn't work. So what we had to do is we had to cut off the factory tabs, relocate this one here so it's straight up and down. And if you ever have to relocate the tabs, what you do is go ahead and mock this one up, mock your upper one up with the plate on it. Plate center to center hole is 12 inches, so instead of measuring it, just go ahead and bolt your plate on, tack this one in, roll your bottom one into position, make sure you get your left and rights right, tack your bottom one, everything should be fine and dandy. Before you fully weld it, make sure this is pivot and our upper plate are on a slide, make sure everything slides nice and freely. Once everything's good, pull the plate off, full welds, good to go. So that was the second problem that we ran into on this chassis compared to what we normally have everything set up for. If you buy a used sprint car chassis, hopefully it will have this right here. This is your bell crank stand, throttle post, whatever you want to call it. Our brake and throttle kits need this post to mount our sensors to it. So if your car does not have this on, no big deal, drops the line, we'll get you one sent out. Otherwise, you need this guy. If you use chassis, do not cut that off. You're gonna need it for our kit. Okay, this little tab right here, we're using a Logitech surround sound, the G920, or G2, I can't, what's the box say? Z906, I was close. So we're using that 5-point surround sound. This is a front center speaker, so we made a little mount here for that. Okay. The one thing that we did different here with this car here is normally you have a side panel that we have wrapped around, side panel that wraps around. The center panel right here is its own panel independently. And the reason why we did that is we want to make, if there's ever an issue, everything accessible as easy as possible. So if you have, you know, your monitor straddled across this, something happens, you need to get inside in a quick hurry, pop off your Zeus buttons, that whole front plate panel pulls out. Everything is completely accessible. All your electronics, everything like that is sitting right there ready to rock. 4 plates, boom, 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 boom. 2 purposes. Purpose number 1, holes, and then that is gonna be to mount your caster wheels to. Caster wheels, we like to do this for 2 reasons. 1, so the car is movable, that's a given. 2, if you mount and you have one of these cars sitting on the ground, it's an absolute pain in the butt to get in and out of the car because your legs are just at a weird angle to push up off the floor to get out of the car and then get in the car. You fall into the car, not sit in the car. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, this is the exciting one. We teamed up with D-Box and also Sigma. These are actually mounts if you want to add motion, whether it's gonna be for your order that you place with us or whether down the road, these guys are already set up for motion. All of our cars already have these plates mounted to this. Works out pretty trick. Depending on what motion system you're gonna go with, whether it's D-Box Gen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or the Sigmas, put your bracket on, drill your holes, it's a happy place. You're ready to rock. Now, for this hardcore model, this is where this plate is. All of our chassis have that mount right back there. Our hardcore models is here. If you buy our hybrid model that has the extended front end, this mount is actually going to be right up here, right in front of where the motor plate would be. And that's going to be because to distribute the weight a little bit better. Okay. Throttle pedal. KPCs, this wasn't a major issue, no big deal, we're used to it. KPCs use like a bolt welded right here, and that's gonna be your pivot for your throttle pedal. We use XXX throttle pedals with our builds, so we just had to cut that bolt off, weld on these little tabs that we have, these little spud tabs, and now we can use a traditional sprint car throttle pedal that we're accustomed to here. You can also use the All-Star throttle pedal. That's the older, like a horseshoe design that's actually going to drill and bolt down through to your floorboards. That would mount up to here, so you don't have to worry about adding these if you don't want to. Chassis tabs. One of the builds that we've done recently, the whole lower rail, instead of having Zeus plates, they had tabs and the whole lower panel bolts on. Oh my God, what a time issue. But at Maverick Simulations, we want to build these like real race cars. So we cut off all those tabs, we put on Zeus plates. Now, you don't need to have all the Zeus plates like all real race cars do in all the right locations. It doesn't really matter. But keep this in mind, if you ever add a butt kicker to your car, or if you ever add like a D-Box where it has the vibration built into the actuators, if you don't have this one right here and you have your aluminum panel right up against the bar, and that car starts vibrating, shaking, moving all around, it's gonna sound like your car's coming apart because that panel's gonna be over here just slapping like crazy. So we put all the Zeus plates on here so that way everything's tied into the chassis. There's no slapping, no moving around. Everything's fixed just like a real car would be. Depending on what kind of car you get, just make sure that all the bars are there. So like this chassis that we got, whenever it was in a real wreck, they had to cut the rear end out of the car to get the rear end out. So it was actually cut here, cut there with a torch, and cut here with a torch to get that lower rail up to get the rear end out. What we ended up doing is we ended up rebending the lower bar. We slugged it all in, got that all in, and then you know, we had to just make another new lower portion down here. And the backside, with the help of God and a porta power, we got this one right here pushed back into place and then re-welded in, so we did not have to replace that bar, which was cool. For our button plates, we usually have our button plates mount up here. This one's a little bit different than what we're accustomed to with this shorter height bar. Normally we're using the XXX maximum ones that start up here and then they come down. So it gives you a lot of surface area to mount that bad boy to. This one here's a lot shorter, a lot narrower, so we had to come up with just a little bit design system. So Zeus button from this side, and then it wraps around, and then enough width right here to hold a row of switches, and it zaps that way with the other Zeus buttons. Just keep that in mind if you do want to add a button plate box in the future. Wing cylinder mount, all cars would have this if you get like a wing car. And then we added another one to this side. Now the reason why we add another one to this side is because all of the sims that we build, we use a freestanding monitor stand. So that means the monitor stand is not tied into the car whatsoever. So that way if it has motion and the chassis is all moving around, it's not slapping your, you know, multiple $1,000 monitors all around also. So in the event that you do want to add your monitors into your chassis and tie it all in together, what we did is we added this additional tab. That way if you want to run a strut brace from this one and this one out to your monitor stand, just for additional support, that bad boy there is ready to go for you. All of our cars are going to be using real sprint car shifters. So this right here is where the sprint car shifter bolts to. This is, as far as we found out, this is a standard center to center hole size. So if your car doesn't have this, I would recommend adding it now. If not, you you don't need it, but eventually you will if you ever want to add one of our shifters to it. Word of outlaw safety bars, we added them. Why? That absolutely makes no sense to anyone. Well, the reason why is because we developed a tear-off pull switch. And to pull a tear off is you have to reach up by your helmet and pull a tear off down. Now, the only way you could do that if you don't run a full containment seat, there's no way to mount it. But what we did is we developed a switch that actually clamps onto these Word of Outlaw safety bars. So whether you're right-handed, left-handed on where you pull, you can swap it from left to right. And also if you have an adult or a kid or anyone like that, you can adjust the height of it to put that tear-off pull switch anywhere you want to. So that's why we added these safety bars. Okay, in the back, let's talk fuel cells. Outlaw style mount, ATL style mount. Pretty much all cars are going to have these upper ones right here, or some of like the higher end cars, they don't use the weld on brackets, they use the clamp on style. We get this from All-Star if needed. All-Star Performance or King Racing products, they make them also. So that is going to matter if you're going to put a tail tank in your car. If you're going to if you want to turn into a beer cooler, you're going to need those mounts. If you want to turn your tail tank into your beer cooler, I repeat, you will need to add these mounts. Okay, so that's going to be that style, and then these are the outlaw mounts for the lower ones on the lower or on the torsion tubes. Now, if you run an ATL cell, all depends on which one you want to go with. ATL cells, they mount down here and they go straight up and down, and then bolts go in this way. So depending on what cell you're going to run is going to dictate what your lower mounts are. Typically everything that we always see are the outlaw style mounts, which everything comes in from the sides. But every car is a little bit different. Okay. There's another reference point back here that we use. Going back to the tail tanks, is we use the top of the tail tank. That basically just sets the height and just tells us where it is. So that way when you're fabricating everything like that, you always know where the top of the tail tank is, so you don't have that big thing hanging up and taking up a lot of space in your shop. Okay, these guys right here, these serve no real sprint car purpose, but what they are is they're for the beer crowd and the buddy crowd. And what we mean by that is when you're trying to watch a race, picture there's a seat here, picture there's a driver's head there, picture there's a steering wheel there, and all this chaos is taking place, and you're trying to look through all the tubes and you can't see what's going on. Well, no problem. We put these little brackets on here, run 2 straps across, you mount another monitor or another TV back here. So that way when your buddies are back here drinking beer, harassing you, telling you, making fun of you because you keep on jumping a cushion at Lernerville, telling you what horrible driver you are, they can actually see what's taking place and he cannot deny it. These are a very, very important piece in any simulator build. Okay, all right, So again, we're adding the Logitech Z906 surround sound, and it runs a huge bass box. So right here we mounted, we welded in additional tabs right here, and we use 1-inch angle as aluminum strap and to go across and mount that right here. Typically this would be where your rear end pumpkin would be, but that's where we mount that bass cannon at right there. Okay, I know some guys want to think that, oh, I'm gonna mount my computer there. Great idea. And I even seen some guys that want to actually build a stand right here, mount the computer right there, and then put the tail tank over top. Neat idea, not a great idea. And the reason why I say that is because computers put off heat. That tail tank is going to act like a giant heat shroud. It's basically a blanket for your computer, which is bad. I know one guy that was adamant that wanted to do that, so I recommended him where he had his top plate at, like where his fuel cap would be at, mount a couple computer ventilation fans up there, just to try to suck that heat out. You know, I'm not sure if he ended up doing that or not, but that's what we advised. Okay. As you're welding, fabricating, everything along those lines, anything that sticks out, like even like a little bubble of a weld or a tab or anything that sticks out past your plane of your body line, you want to try to grind those flat. Right here's a fine example. This is where the ratcheting seat belts originally bolted to, and what we did is we actually took them and we ground them flat. Because some panels don't go all the way back here. All of our panels go the whole way back to enclose this whole mechanism. And the reason why you want to grind all this stuff flat on the plane is so once you put your panel up, and if that's sticking out, that's going to put a dent out and it's going to look absolutely horrible. So make sure everything that's on your plane, you have that rolled out. Okay. Use chassis. Sometimes you may get a chassis that does not have this lower saddle in it, and this lower saddle is for your steering gear mount. And I'll show you, there's a tube that sits in here. So if you get our SimMagic tube mount, turned into like a real sprint car type steering box, this is a tube right here that needs to sit in this saddle. So you should get the saddle with it. Usually you don't get the cap with it because the caps are usually built aluminum. If you don't get the cap, drop us a line. We'll get one shipped out to you. We have them available in billet aluminum and also 3D printed. Okay, inside the cockpit, same thing. This is where your master cylinder is going to mount to. This is a traditional standardized size. Most everyone uses Wilwood master cylinders. That's what our kit uses also. Make sure that's there. If not, we sell the tabs and the plates separate. And your brake pedal tabs also, this is where your brake pedal is going to pivot at right here on these ones. Some chassis manufacturers have a specific brake pedal for their chassis because of the pedal length. So depending on what kind of car, if you get a car with a brake pedal, that's great. That means hopefully it's matched to that. But we need to have these guys also once mounting everything up for your sim. So you may wonder where we purchase a lot of our real race car parts from. Well, that's quite easy. Precise Racing Products. Hoosier Tire Mid-Atlantic and Precise Racing Products is your one-stop shop for all your racing needs. They specialize in all forms of motorsports, including dirt, asphalt, drag, power sports, and everything else that goes fast. They stock a wide variety of Hoosier racing tires, speed parts, and racing fuel. Stop at our showrooms in Pennsylvania or Maryland, or visit them online at preciseracing.com. And remember, at Precise Racing, we sell speed. Okay, for seat mounts, you're going to have one butt bar, you need that one, and then you're going to have multiple hole locations in all these bars right here, depending on what kind of chassis you have, to mount the back part of your seat to. Okay, back to the surround sound. This right here is the mounts that we welded onto the chassis to mount the control box, the level, the volume control, and everything like that. So we're going to have little 3D printed brackets that's going to hold that control box, and it's going to bolt right to these tabs. We try our best not to have any of our components bolt to body panels, because just like a real race car, if you need to strip it down to bare chassis, we want nothing attached to the body panels. That way you get the body panels out of the way, and then you have nothing but components, wiring, and chassis exposed. So really nothing ever attached to the body panels themselves. Now here we have the wing tab, and what this is this is the mount for where you have the wing control valve. This is where it's going to mount to. Now, depending on what chassis you have, now we have like right around 12 different used chassis here on site right now. Just about every darn car has a different tab, which is kind of a pain. So whenever we have our wings, our wing control mount, it's going to have a blank mounting plate on there. So that way, depending on like what kind of chassis you have, you're just going to just slide it up against this, mark your holes, drill them, and everything's good to go. And one of the things we pride ourselves on here the most at Maverick Simulations is we will never produce anything that we will not be proud to put our names on. So this is one of the last things we put on all of our chassis is the serial number plate. So if you have any more questions about building your dream sprint car simulator, feel free to drop us a line, as sprint cars are the reason we wake up every single morning. So thanks guys, Breakaway, be a Maverick.